Thank you, Joe, for the invitation. It's an honor to be here to speak to you today about the science of skin and the challenges of sticking wearables to that substrate. So, I've been at 3M for 25 years and in this particular role for about 2 months, so relatively new in this position. I'm part of a group that is the OEM part of our business. We have a branded business that sells directly to hospitals, all aspects of hospital tapes, vascular securement devices, and advanced wound care solutions. I'm the part of the business that tries and takes that technology and provide it to people like yourselves that are developing wearable technology. So I'll tell you a little bit about 3M, about what we're trying to do in the area of understanding skin to make better adhesives that accomplish the goal of having a wearable device that stays on, doesn't stay on too aggressively. I'll tell you about some of the complications associated with that, or fall off too soon, which would be not a good outcome for a patient. So, as we've been working in this market for a number of years, we're hearing a lot more requests for extended wear. So in a traditional hospital setting, people may have tape on for 2 to 3 days or a vascular dressing for a few days. With these wearable devices, because of the essential data that they're providing, people are asking for more and more extended wear, particularly in the glucose space, things like that. So there's a lot of value in that, but it comes with a trade-off. You're using more aggressive adhesives, and removal of that device could also cause injury. So we'll talk a bit about that, the types of injuries that can occur and how they should be avoided. Some tools that you can use to trial different tapes, how you select those tapes and make better selections to get to a solution faster. And involve, much like the security aspect that was mentioned earlier, don't leave it till the 11th hour. So the adhesive is a critical part of the performance of the device. It's often an afterthought. Don't leave it till the end, because there are design compromises that you don't want to make that might alter the performance of your device. And as an adhesive company, someone who's been making tapes for roughly 116 years, what do we do in the lab and how do we sort of take that into the world of someone wearing a medical device and some of the challenges associated with what's going on in the lab and what actually happens on the skin. So I'll go pretty quickly through this part. 3M is a big company. Most of you know us for Post-its, Scotch tape, things like that. That's about 20% of our business is the stuff you can buy in Target and Walmart, places like that. The other 80% is solutions that we sell into the industrial, healthcare, electronic space to provide all kinds of solutions for people. We spend a lot on R&D. We have about $32 billion in sales. Like I say, we're one of the Dow 30 as well. So we've been around a while. How do you keep a company that's been around 116 years fresh? And I'll tell you a little bit about our philosophy, and that's to take science and apply it to life. Part of that trick is to sort of let the inmates run the asylum, as we might say. The techies are kind of the prima donnas in 3M, so it's good to be a technical person in 3M. We have access to a lot of tools, and I'll tell you a little bit about our philosophy for getting that technology into customers' hands. It's a great climate to work in, creative people. We work closely with our customers to collect insights, and then we have access to these 46 technology platforms that we lay out like a periodic table. And the divisions that sell those products that use that technology don't own the technology. The corporation owns the technology, or the techies own the technology. So we freely mix these various technologies. We take adhesives in particular across all the markets that we work in, electronics, healthcare, consumer, obviously. But it's where those things mix together where the fun really starts to happen. Advanced window films, filling materials that no longer use metal, that look just like tooth material and are in fact stronger than tooth material. Take a combination of those various elements from the periodic table. And then medical dressings, which is what I'll be talking about today. We take advantage of a number of those technologies for us to develop state-of-the-art solutions. So let me talk a little bit about the science of skin. Skin seems like a fairly simple substrate to work with. It's rough, it's got a little bit of hair, it sweats, a few things like that. It's actually a very complicated system. Just a quick quiz. What do you know about skin? According to the latest studies of dust in a modern home, what percent of that dust is shed skin? Common wisdom was 80%, but they've done some recent studies, it's actually closer to 20%. It's still a gross number, knowing that 20% of that things and particles flying around is actually coming off of you. True or false? Humans, on average, have the same number of hair follicles as chimpanzees. It is in fact true. We just have thinner hairs and they don't grow as long. So we're not that removed from that particular ancestor. The average person in a desert environment, fully hydrated, would sweat 1 liter, 0.6 liter, or 0.3 liters per hour of fluid. It's actually 1 liter, and that's the average. There's a Gaussian distribution in everything in the world. Heavy sweaters might emit 3.4 liters, which is a gallon of liquid per hour. So for the space of 17 hours in the desert, you could lose as much as 17 liters of liquid. So doing a little math here, 30 pounds of liquid. Now, you would die if you didn't drink water in that kind of situation, so you would replace most of that weight with water. It's not a good diet plan to go to the desert. True or false? Skin plays a critical role in the regulation of calcium uptake in our bodies and in bones. It's true, it's regulated through the vitamin D process. So in general, skin plays a huge role in a number of things, and we mostly take it for granted. It's an elastic organ. It should be thought of as our biggest organ. You have about 2 square meters of skin on your body, about 8 pounds of skin overall. And it plays critical roles in protecting us from the environment, protecting us from ultraviolet radiation. A lot of touch and other things revolve around that. It can repair itself when damaged. It's a marvelous system when it's working well. Because of all the respiratory and breathing and water and things that I'll explain to you, it's also a very difficult substrate to stick things to. So skin structure, if you've looked at this recently, layers upon layers, and those layers are there to do particular jobs. The top layer is mostly dead skin. We call it the stratum corneum. It's around 30 to 40 microns typically, and it's kind of a brick and mortar structure of dead cells that are oriented sort of horizontally, again, as a barrier. Low in water and moisture content. Underneath it is the epidermis. That's kind of the connective layer that holds that stratum corneum in place. It's made up of cells that are slowly transitioning from the blood supply to become the dead skin that becomes that layer of dead skin. So much like a snake, that skin falls off over time. Then there's connective tissues underneath, and there's the reticular dermis, which is an important layer. That's where a lot of the hair follicles, sweat glands, and things are contained. So again, a very active working system, multiple layers, transitioning fluids and cells to do the job of protecting us from the environment, keeping our temperatures in place, those sorts of things. Just a quick thing on the microbiology of the skin. A lot of us use hand sanitizers, things like that. Your typical square inch of skin has around 50 million microbes. It's a gross number. 50 million. You can kill that top layer of skin if you use a topical treatment of some sort. The hair follicles protect the microbes that can't be attacked in that way, and you'll get a new bloom in about 18 hours if you didn't touch your face. Your face has around 500 million microbes per square inch, so avoid touching your face if possible. It's almost impossible to do. The point is, you have a continuing factory, not just for the things that the skin does, but microbes find this a very attractive home to live in. Water management, in particular, is critical, and it plays a role in the adhesive because built into our bodies is the way in which water moves from 70% environment deeper in the skin to about 15% in the top layer of skin, and that's part of our sweating process. It's part of the evaporation and the cooling that the body does. Your adhesive on top has to be able to manage that moisture. If you completely block the surface and don't allow moisture to evaporate, you can get something called maceration. Stay in a bathtub for a couple hours, that's what it will look like. Macerated skin, which can be susceptible to damage. Aging, if you can avoid it at all costs. Aging skin is a bad substrate as well. It's much thinner, it's much less elastic, it's much more prone to damage. The same thing happens with infants as well. So in particular, most of the things on that list, wrinkles, There's a lot of bad things that happen with age. It must be taken into consideration when you're developing a medical device, depending on your target population. If you're dealing with the very young, the very old, or the very ill, the skin can be impacted by that disease state and age as well. So, again, gentler is better whenever possible. A lot of factors affecting skin. I won't go through all these in the interest of time. Skin in general is a low surface energy material. So when we do lab studies, we typically do peels off of stainless steel that has a surface energy of around 500 dynes per centimeter. Skin is much closer to polyethylene or polypropylene in terms of very low surface energy. But because of the surface roughness and other sorts of things, it's much more dynamic and very difficult to model with just using one of those polymers as your substrate to study because of the things I've talked about with oil, what comes out of the skin, liquids, etc., and sweat. So we look at all these things typically. Breathing, cell renewal cycle, the skin falls off typically after 14 days. That's important. There's a lot of elasticity in skin. Where you stick is particularly important. Again, I mentioned the low surface energy, the rough texture. I'll mention that as well in terms of how adhesion builds over time, and then a contaminated surface if someone's using a lot of lotions, those sorts of things, those can impact the performance of an adhesive as well. Medical adhesives. So in general, if you're going to be using this in a medical device or a clinically approved device, you need to use all the same regulations you would use for other raw materials that you'd be using. ISO 13485, biocompatibility testing as well, the ISO 10993 as well. So in general, Korean provides these as part of our offerings for use in medical wearable devices. So how have adhesives evolved over time, particularly in the medical industry? A lot of the early adhesives were natural rubber. I think all of us remember what happened in the 80s and late 70s when the latex allergy started to develop. And so we really are avoiding all aspects of natural latex anymore. And things are now really much more focused on the acrylic adhesives and silicone adhesives. If you don't work in this area, I'll explain this a little more. But acrylics are still very prominent. They're some of the best long-term wear adhesives. Silicones are emerging as an important area because they're really gentle to the skin. I'll explain some of the science of that as well. We do a lot of different testing, a lot of different mechanical sorts of things to try and understand the properties of these adhesives. One that I'll mention just as important is something called shear. So how rubbery is that material? How soft is it? Over time, can that material migrate down your arm? That's particularly important if you have a cannula or something inserted into the arm and it can't move. So another important factor to take into consideration when you're creating an adhesive or choosing an adhesive. If you can't have that material move, it just needs to maintain contact, that's okay. If you have something inserted, then you have to avoid something that might cause that slope. Sorry, I lost the X and Y axis there, but in general, synthetic rubbers, the first adhesives that people started to use, very strong initial tap. They hold very well the first time they put on the skin, but it tends to degrade over time as they absorb water and oil. Silicones are marvelous materials in that they pretty much hold on and don't change their properties over time until they stop working. They don't last as long as acrylates. Acrylates, you have to be particularly careful about how you apply them because of that low initial tap. It builds over time as the acrylate sort of absorbs into the pores and rough textures of the skin, and it builds adhesion over time and tends to be the best adhesive for long-term wear. Just mention that because I think silicones over time may replace some of the acrylates and they have additional benefits with less skin building. This is just a study that shows sort of how removal of an acrylate adhesive versus a silicone adhesive. In the case of the acrylate, the bond between the skin and the tape is very strong, so as you remove the tape, you tend to stretch the skin more. The silicone adhesive is a little bit more rubbery, and it tends to take most of the stress during the removal process and leaves the skin a bit more intact. And when we do BCA sort of protein studies looking at residual skin on removed tape, you see quite a bit of skin that's peeled off with acrylic adhesive. With silicone, you see almost no skin. So again, part of this removal process just the old adage, do you want the bandage removed fast, or do you want the bandage removed low and slow? Remember that. So don't do the quick removal if you don't want to scream in general. We're trying to avoid something called MARSI, medical adhesive-related skin injuries. So very common in the early use of adhesives, and even today, we see issues with the unintentional removal or damage to skin caused by medical adhesives if they're too aggressive. And so I'll show you some pictures. I try not to be too gross about it, but in general, what you want to avoid is where the skin sticks to the adhesive more than the skin-to-skin attachment. So if the attachment of that top layer of skin to the adhesive is stronger than that skin is attached to the underlying layer, that skin's going to come out and cause problems. So that's what we're trying to avoid. This is hopefully the only gross one, but skin stripping can occur where you take off that top layer of skin if the adhesive is too aggressive, and you really want to avoid that if at all possible. So stronger is not always better. If you're trying to do something that lasts for 7 days, don't choose a 14-day adhesive to gain insurance, because at that 7-day removal period, you may have some problems. So you want to find that sweet spot of the Goldilocks point in the curve. Other types of injuries that occur, you can have allergic challenges, folliculitis. You can irritate the hair follicles, irritants from contact, things that can happen, maceration if you don't manage the moisture properly, skin tear, or again, you damage the skin severely during removal. Tension blisters. So the application process is also very important in this in terms of if you stretch the adhesive when you put on a medical device and then allow that to relax, you actually create blisters, which can be a painful outcome. So again, things to avoid. Risk factors for MARSI. I mentioned aging. The illness itself, immunosuppression, can cause problems in skin, the extremes of age. Skin changes with sun exposure. Again, it tends to dry out the skin. And the choice of adhesive is particularly important. So I'll step aside here for a second and just give you a quick advertising. If you're looking at adhesives for your medical devices, we have a website called findmyadhesive.com, and gives you a walkthrough of I want an adhesive that's going to last for X amount of time, what sort of medical device, what sort of application, location on the body, those sorts of things. And it'll give you a choice of 2 or 3 adhesives to at least start your trials with. So a pretty handy system to work with, starting from just, I have a concept, and it will take you through, and then you can call someone and get samples of that. Again, just different choices you can make about the application to get you to at least a starting point for these adhesives. So I mentioned before the challenge of making measurements in the laboratory and converting those into a real-life situation. So we have never found, at least to this point, a predictive model that allows us to do that. And so we have to do our own in-house clinical trials. So I'll just share a few sort of pictures how we do clinical trials in-house. So we work with 3 employees. They volunteer for a little bit of compensation to come in and wear tape for a few weeks. I'm not one of those volunteers. But it's really helpful for us to be able to better understand how adhesives work in a real environment. So the challenge for us is all these people are healthy. So keep that in mind, and you'll see a lot of asterisks on as I share data with you. These aren't predictive, they're directional, because again, these are healthy. You need to test your applications with your type of customers as well, and patients. And again, you see the little bottom left is kind of, we can peel off the adhesive to measure the force required as well. So over 8 days, this is I think from a couple of years ago, 8 days is pretty easy. We have a lot of candidates that do 8-day and stay on. So as we're measuring to the left to right, we see some adhesives. We're always trying new sorts of things, trying to find the gentlest possible adhesive. Some of those don't manage very well, and others do. We target 80% survival. We ask people not to do hot tubs. That's the only limitation we ask for activities. We ask them to keep a diary of physical activity. Do they run a marathon? Do they ice fish? Do they wear them? So we've also extended that to 21 days. And again, a similar sort of thing. We ask people to wear 3 types of the same tape so that we could get some data these were peeled off after 10 days. Our internal review board had some concerns that someone over 21 days might get a more severe allergic reaction. So 10 days we had to test each tape to make sure we didn't have any deleterious outcomes for people. These are tape only, no device. I'll talk a little bit about devices here in a bit. In general, 21 days is a real challenge. As I said, the dead skin layer tends to fall off after 14 to 21 days. And so we didn't really, in this situation, find the perfect sample that would last 80% of the adhesive or tape staying on for that long. So we're continuing to do research, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing to overcome these challenges to move from 21 to even perhaps 30 days of device wear. Skip that. Just in general, we're always trying to watch the skin to make sure we don't have any challenges. So in general, when the tape is removed, there's a slight discoloration. Anything that lasts longer than 30 minutes is considered a negative outcome. So in general, we got pretty low scores in terms of irritation for all of these, even up to the 21 days, the ones that stay on. So we're good there in terms of doing no harm. We're also looking at pain. So we ask people to provide that score 1 to 10 to make sure we're not causing too much pain when the tape is removed. And in general, these are pretty low scores, so people aren't experiencing a lot of pain in that long and slow removal process that I mentioned before. So no one's wearing tape around. That's not really the point of this. This is medical devices, so I'll show you some results where we're actually putting simulated devices on the skin. So again, we take an inclusive device. It's just some polymer material, and we ask people to wear that around for extended periods of time, just like we did with the tape samples. These are just some pictures. We're always looking for lift, and so lift is the beginning of the failure mode, right? So it's starting to lift. We have various scores for that, and in general, these are just some of the volunteers we were able to take pictures of showing these results for people on their chest, in this case, and abdomen. One thing we did discover along the way was the device with adhesive cut just to the edge of the device does not perform as well as if you allow a skirt. Many people are starting to recognize that, but in general, the blue data shows with a skirt, and the orange data is without the skirt. In all cases, without the skirt performed less, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. In general, what we believe is when that device is on, you're always bumping into things as you might expect on your abdomen when you're taking clothes off. Any force that occurs on that causes issues of a pull if you don't have a skirt. If you have a skirt, that force goes into what we would call a shear. It's dissipated by going into a shear mode, which leaves the device intact. And so without going too much into science, use a skirt where possible if you want something to last longer. And that's just something we've learned over time. This is our latest product, our 4076 product that was launched earlier this spring. And this material in particular shows a lot of promise, not just for 15 days, 14 days, nearly 100% survival. Looks really good for 21 and some of the 30 days that we're trying right now. So this material in particular and relatives of that material, it's an acrylate-based material. We're really excited about that material for extended wear. So just in summary, hope what you've taken away from the skin is a dynamic surface. It's highly individualized. There's always going to be sort of people out on the edges of those demographic and other sorts of things that are going to be a challenge. And so we may not find the perfect adhesive for every situation, but using this science, we hope we can get to that 90-95% success and higher for the behavior of these medical devices. We're still looking for that predictive model. We would love to find some way to take what we can learn in the lab and not have to do clinical trials. We just haven't found that yet. So clinical trials, at least for us, are the only way to really take what we learn in the lab, but we have to try it on actual people because of this challenge of skin that we talked about. Think about tapes and adhesives early in the design process. We appreciate getting called in not at the 11th hour after all the design decisions have been made. We can help you manage some of those moisture and other issues in the device design, build that skirt in, things like that to be successful. And we hope to show you some data maybe at the next conference next year that goes out for 30 days.
He's already planning for next year. I like that. I have a question for you especially, because I saw people taking pictures of your presentation, and I know that you shared some proprietary information.
That's okay.
Is it okay for us to give your presentation to folks?
Please send me an email, and I'll...
Get his business card, get yours. Let's hear it for Dell Lawson.